What up? It's your boy Wall Street, and I'm back. And I have some news. Well, you guys have heard this news already by now, but Tom Thibodeau has been relieved of his duties as the New York Knicks head coach following an exit from the Eastern Conference Finals, in which the Knicks lost 4-2 in the series to the Indiana Pacers. This was the first conference finals appearance they have had since 2000. So 25 years without making the conference finals. And I've said this before, this is definitely the best Knicks team that I've ever seen in my lifetime, right? And I grew up, in Connecticut, so all my friends are Knicks fans, basically. Some are Celtics fans, some are Nets fans, but the vast majority are Knicks fans. And, even the Carmelo days, with Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire, like the Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns duo is probably the most talented combo we've had since I've been alive, right? So, shout out to the team. And obviously, I'm not super surprised that Tibbs got canned because the coach is always the first one to go, right? It's hard to blame the players because the players are playing on the court and you really need them. I would argue that you need the coach just as much, but a lot of people think differently, and they think if they add a different voice in the locker room, it might change things up, right? And I think there were some issues with how Tibbs was coaching the team that a lot of people had voiced, even dating back to last season, just with how he's, running them into the ground. He's got the starters playing when they're up 18 or 20 points with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Like normally most coaches would have taken their guys out by then. There's a whole laundry list of stuff. But a lot of people say that Tibbs is basically like a high school coach. He's running dudes into the ground. He's making them practice way too hard. They're not going to be able to make it through an 82-game season plus another 15 to 20 games in the postseason to, win a championship, right? And I understand the point there, and I understand the perspective. So let's talk about who would be the best candidate to replace Tibbs in New York, right? And there's already been a lot of people coming out and saying different names, but these are some names that I think would make the most sense. So obviously at the top of my list is Mike Malone. I made a video about Mike Malone coaching, in the NBA after he got fired by the Nuggets with 3 games before the postseason started, which is just wild. I've never seen anything like that. And Mike Malone obviously got fired by the Nuggets, along with the GM Calvin Booth, because the two of them seemingly could not get along. Mike Malone is a little bit more of a stubborn guy, but I think it's in a good way. He's a motivator. I think he's very good when it comes to dealing with people and personalities. I think he keeps it real, and he doesn't, let any sort of BS fly in his locker room. And I think that's probably why it came to an end in Denver, because I think he had been there for a while. He was there since 2015, led the team to their first ever title in 2023. And obviously Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, those are all big pieces of why they won that championship. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, like all these guys, right? So a lot of people are questioning whether or not he can adapt to the Knicks. And I think he can. Right, I think the play styles that he had with Jokic and Jamal Murray are not exactly identical to how Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson play, because Karl Anthony Towns is not the same level of passer and facilitator from the 5 spot that Nikola Jokic is. But I do think there are some overlap in terms of similarities between the two duos, right? So I think Mike Malone could be a guy that you could plug in and would understand how to operate this team a little bit differently. I do think, regardless, they're going to need to figure out how to get a deeper bench, right? They need some better defenders for all positions, right? I like how Deuce McBride defends. I like Mitchell Robinson's defense, but it's hard to play Mitchell Robinson when he can't do anything offensively, and he's made of glass. So you never know when the dude's going to go down and, be out for 4 months. You never know, right? And I like Mitchell Robinson. I hope he does not get injured for the rest of his career, for the rest of his life. I want him to play, but he just has proven to not be the most reliable in terms of availability thus far into his career. So I think Mike Malone could do a good job. I think he would be my number one pick. I think Taylor Jenkins, who was fired by the Grizzlies like 9 games before the postseason started this past season, which is also ridiculous. I think he could also do a good job, but I think he is a more defensive-minded, hard-nosed team type of coach, and I don't know if that really aligns as well with the play style of the Knicks, but who knows? It might be the play style that you need. But I'm a big fan of Taylor Jenkins. You know, he spent a lot of time coaching in the G League. I think he was even down there when it was still the D League. You know, and he really worked his way up, you know, and Mike Malone did too, obviously. I think a lot of these coaches in the league have really earned their stripes and shown why they should be, you know, worthy of head coaching positions. The other guy that I saw mentioned, which I thought was pretty interesting, was Chris Paul. And Chris Paul is like 39 or 40 years old. I think he's going to be a free agent. He might have a player option, but I think he's going to be a free agent going into the summer. And a lot of people are saying maybe he's just going to retire and they'll bring in Chris Paul to be the coach. I don't think that makes a ton of sense to do right now. I think this team is too talented for a rookie coach to come in and expect, you know, them to perform better than they did this season, which would be getting to the NBA Finals. So I think that's a lot of pressure on Chris Paul. I think if they wanted to bring in a guy like Taylor Jenkins or Mike Malone or someone else, I've also heard Jeff Van Gundy get thrown around in there, which I think would also be a very cool thing to do. You know, Jeff Van Gundy used to be the head coach of the Knicks, and I think he resigned back in 2001. So if they brought him back, I think that'd be super cool. I believe Jeff Van Gundy is currently a coach with the Los Angeles Clippers. He's an assistant coach, but he was an analyst for a long time, you know, on ESPN. I love Jeff Van Gundy. He's one of the funniest guys on TV. Well, he's not on TV right now, but still a very funny guy. Yeah, he's a lead assistant coach for the Los Angeles Clippers. And he's been doing a great job. He's a very good defensive mind. So I think, you know, if the Knicks wanted to interview him for the job, he could likely also be someone that lands it. But outside of Mike Malone, Taylor Jenkins, and Jeff Van Gundy, the only other guy that I think would make sense would be Mike Budenholzer, who also has championship experience, won with the Bucks back in 2021. And Mike Budenholzer is known for squeezing out as much talent as possible from his team, right? And he has gotten blamed before for basically resting his starters too much, right? Which is the opposite of what Tibbs is getting criticized for. So I think it would bring a different perspective to the locker room. It would bring a different perspective to the team in general. Obviously, I think a lot of what they do is going to be dependent on the team that they can form in free agency. They need to bring in some new guys. I would advise they re-sign Landry Shamet. I think they should use Landry Shamet more. I don't know why they didn't, you know, think about using him until late in the playoffs, really. You know, Precious Achiuwa is going to be a free agent. I don't know if he's going to come back. So they got a lot of thinking to do, right? But I think regardless, if they can assemble a little bit of a deeper bench, Mike Budenholzer is a guy that will run a deeper rotation than Tibbs. He might not run a 12-man rotation, but I think he'll probably run a 9, 10-man rotation as opposed to like a 7-man rotation that Tibbs was doing on some nights. So I think those are all really important things to note. But if I had to pick, I think Mike Malone is probably the guy for this job. I think he's proven it most recently out of all these coaches that he can win a championship. You know, but again, like the Mike Budenholzer thing, I think is interesting. You know, he won a championship in 2021. Obviously, Mike Malone won it in 2023, so they're only a couple years apart. You know, but I think Budenholzer, you know, he was also the head coach of that Atlanta Hawks team in like 2014, 2015, something like that. And they went like 60 and 22. They had 4 All-Stars. It was Al Horford, Paul Millsap, Jeff Teague, and Kyle Korver, right? A lot of people don't remember that Kyle Korver was an All-Star. Like, Mike Budenholzer really brought out the best in his teams. And I think he got a bad rap in Phoenix. I don't think the issues there were really his fault. I think that team was just very poorly constructed. I think he could have done a little bit better, right? I think maybe utilizing Tyus Jones a little bit more, I think that might have helped, but at the end of the day, I don't really blame him for that. I blame the roster and just the method of going all in for players that didn't really seem like they would be playing much defense, and you just can't win with basically 3 shooting guards that aren't like it just wasn't going to work out. That's not a team. Basketball is a team sport. You got to play both ends of the floor. And I love Kevin Durant. I love Devin Booker. Big fan of Bradley Beal. But I had a feeling it was not going to work. Right? It could have, but there was also a high bust out potential type of deal with that. So, Mike Budenholzer, Mike Malone, Jeff Van Gundy, Taylor Jenkins, I think you'll probably see one of those guys be the next coach of the New York Knicks. I'm not sure where we're going to see Tibbs. I think we'll probably see Tibbs as an assistant coach somewhere in the near future. But I think he's going to have a tough time getting a head coaching job just because of the rap that he has, because I think he just runs guys into the ground. And a lot of people are noticing this, and that's a big reason why he is the head coach, the only active head coach, the winningest active head coach who has never made an NBA Finals appearance. And his win percentage dips by about 10 to 12% from the regular season to the playoffs, which I think is directly correlated to the fact that he is playing his guys an insane amount of minutes. I'm pretty sure the whole Knicks starting 5 was in the top 20 or top 25 for minutes played this season, with Mikal Bridges being in the top 3 along with Josh Hart right behind him. So shout out Tibbs. I think they could have ran it back next year, and they might not make it to the ECF. They might make it to the NBA Finals. Who knows? But I think having a new voice in the locker room might be helpful for this team. And I think one of those guys that I mentioned, in Mike Malone, Mike Budenholzer, Jeff Van Gundy, or Taylor Jenkins, could do a good job, right? But we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to see what the Knicks start to do in terms of roster movement, who they sign in free agency, what they do in the draft, and who they revise their coaching staff with going into the summer. But that's all I got. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. Who do you think the Knicks should hire as their next head coach? I want to know your thoughts, so please leave some comments down below, and let's get down to it. I'm going to check you later, though. Stay up, stay blessed, stay humble, stay safe, handle business, stand on business. Peace out.